the bridge in Alabama that calls the brave at night true horror encounter. Some places don't lure people in. They wait until responsibility forces someone to stay. This is not a story about thrill seekers or curiosity. It's about a man in Alabama whose job required him to stand on a bridge after dark, long after locals stopped crossing it. Because some structures don't just collapse. They remember who stands on them. The Talladega County Bridge had no official name on most maps, only a maintenance designation assigned decades earlier when it was reinforced after a partial flood collapse. Locals referred to it simply as the Night Bridge, not because of superstition, but because people avoided it after sunset as a matter of routine, the way one avoids a road with no streetlights or a building known for structural instability. There was no signage warning people away. There did not need to be. Caleb Wren learned about the bridge the way most county employees did, through paperwork. He worked as an infrastructure compliance inspector for the Alabama Department of Transportation, a position that required field checks, documentation, and verification rather than repair. His job was not to fix problems. It was to confirm that problems existed and record their progression. Caleb was 38 years old, divorced, and methodical to a fault. He believed in systems, records, and the idea that anything dangerous could be reduced to measurable data if observed long enough. He had worked flood zones, sinkhole corridors, and structurally compromised overpasses without incident. He did not believe in folklore. He believed in stress fractures and erosion. The bridge was scheduled for inspection after a series of complaints filed by residents living on the eastern side of the river. The complaints were inconsistent and poorly written, which was why they were assigned low priority. Some mentioned vibrations at night. Others described sounds. None described damage. Caleb's supervisor scheduled the inspection for a late shift due to traffic restrictions during the day. Caleb arrived just after sunset. The bridge stretched longer than it appeared on the map, a narrow span of reinforced concrete and steel beams crossing slow, black water. No lights were installed along its length. The only illumination came from Caleb's truck headlights and the faint glow of distant homes. The river beneath moved sluggishly, carrying debris in silence. Caleb parked at the western approach and began his preliminary checks. The air temperature was within expected range. No unusual wind. No visible structural displacement. The bridge deck showed hairline cracks consistent with age. Everything was ordinary. At 8:41 p.m., Caleb noted the first anomaly. His vibration sensor registered a low-frequency oscillation that did not correspond to traffic, wind, or water flow. The bridge was empty. No vehicles crossed from either direction. The vibration persisted for 19 seconds before stabilizing. Caleb logged it as a possible sensor calibration issue. At 9:12 p.m., the vibration returned. This time, it lasted longer. Caleb walked further onto the bridge, stopping at the midpoint where the river ran deepest. He placed his equipment on the concrete and waited. The vibration did not feel mechanical. It did not travel through the structure the way stress usually did. It felt localized, as if the bridge itself were responding unevenly to weight. Caleb checked his watch. No scheduled traffic. No trains in the area. No seismic activity reported. He continued working. By 9:47 p.m., the temperature dropped sharply. The air near the bridge felt denser than the surrounding roadway, heavier, almost stagnant. Caleb adjusted his jacket and focused on documenting surface degradation along the railing. At 10:03 p.m., the sound began. It was not loud. It did not echo. It existed beneath the threshold of attention, like pressure in the ears or the hum of distant power lines. Caleb noticed it only because it stopped when he stepped off the bridge to retrieve additional equipment from his truck. When he stepped back onto the concrete, the sound returned. Caleb paused, standing still. The vibration sensor activated again, registering activity without clear origin. The sound seemed to travel upward through the bridge rather than across it, a low resonance that aligned with the structure's internal supports. Caleb logged the phenomenon without commentary. He reminded himself that bridges produced sound constantly. Temperature shifts caused expansion. Water displaced air within hollow spaces. Nothing about the situation required interpretation beyond physics. At 10:26 p.m., Caleb reached the eastern side. He noticed something then that had not been visible from the road. Beneath the bridge, where the concrete supports met the riverbank, erosion had carved out a narrow cavity. The opening was too small to crawl into, but large enough to expose interior reinforcement beams. Caleb crouched, shining his flashlight into the space. The beam surfaces were worn smooth. Not rusted, not fractured, polished. Caleb frowned and photographed the area. Water flow could not account for the uniform wear. It suggested prolonged contact, consistent pressure applied repeatedly over time. At 10:41 p.m., the vibration increased. Caleb stood abruptly as the bridge responded beneath him, not violently but insistently. The oscillation now followed a rhythm. It rose and fell at regular intervals, like measured steps. Caleb checked the roadway. Still empty. The sound deepened. Caleb experienced an unexpected physical response then, one that unsettled him more than the data. His breathing changed without conscious decision, syncing subtly with the vibration. His muscles tensed, not in fear, but anticipation, as if his body expected something to occur. He stepped backward, breaking contact with the midpoint. The vibration weakened. Caleb stepped forward again. It strengthened. He did not repeat the movement. At 10:58 p.m., Caleb decided to conclude the inspection early. He had sufficient documentation to justify a follow-up during daylight hours. He gathered his equipment and began walking back toward the western side. Halfway across, the sound stopped. The sudden silence was more disturbing than the noise had been. Without the low resonance, the night felt hollow. Caleb's footsteps sounded too sharp against the concrete. At 11:04 p.m., the vibration sensor activated one final time. The reading spiked higher than any previous measurement. Caleb stopped walking. The bridge responded beneath him in a way that no structural manual accounted for. The vibration felt directional, rising from below and converging at his position. The concrete beneath his boots felt warmer than it should have. Caleb felt pressure behind his sternum, a sensation not unlike being addressed without sound. His name surfaced in his thoughts unbidden, clear and insistent, not as memory but recognition. The bridge did not creak. It did not crack. It held. Caleb stood frozen, equipment slipping from his hands, as the structure beneath him settled into a stillness that felt deliberate, as though it had acknowledged his presence and adjusted accordingly. He did not leave immediately. He could not explain why. And the bridge did not release him. Caleb Wren remained on the bridge longer than his report later indicated. The official timestamp marked his departure at 11:06 p.m., but his body did not obey that sequence. Time on the bridge behaved differently once the vibration ceased. The air felt compressed, thickened into something that resisted movement. Caleb attempted to step backward toward the western approach, but his muscles responded with hesitation rather than refusal, as if his nervous system had been rerouted through unfamiliar pathways. He did not feel restrained. He felt calibrated. The bridge beneath him no longer vibrated, yet his equipment continued to register low-level activity. The oscillation had shifted beyond measurable parameters, no longer detectable as motion but still present as pressure. Caleb sensed it not through his instruments but through his posture. His weight distributed unevenly across his feet, pulled subtly toward the center of the span. Caleb focused on procedure. He recited inspection steps mentally, grounding himself in routine. He took a photograph of the bridge deck where he stood. The image appeared normal on review, yet his hands shook when he lowered the camera. The temperature reading on his wrist device fluctuated without pattern, rising and falling within seconds. At 11:12 p.m., the river beneath the bridge slowed. Not stopped. Slowed. The debris floating downstream adjusted its movement, drifting in wide arcs rather than straight paths. Caleb leaned over the railing and observed the water's surface. Ripples radiated outward from the supports, not caused by current but by something displacing space beneath the surface. Caleb straightened quickly. He experienced an intrusive certainty then, one that did not feel like thought. It felt like orientation. The bridge knew where he was. Not simply in position, but in relation. His presence had aligned with something internal, something that recognized balance. Caleb attempted to contact his supervisor. His phone showed signal, but the call would not initiate. The device froze briefly before returning to normal. He tried again. Same result. Text messages failed to send. At 11:19 p.m., the sound returned. This time it was unmistakable. It rose from below the bridge, traveling through the supports and into the deck with deliberate rhythm. It matched the spacing of footfalls, though no footsteps occurred. Caleb felt each interval resonate through his chest cavity, as if his ribcage had become part of the structure. He stepped away from the midpoint. The sound followed. Caleb moved faster, breaking into a jog. The bridge responded by amplifying the resonance, adjusting its frequency to match his movement. The sensation escalated rapidly, his breathing forced into synchronization with the sound. Panic threatened to override control, but Caleb forced himself to stop. The moment he stood still, the sound softened. It was not reacting to fear. It was reacting to alignment. Caleb realized then that the bridge was not summoning. It was correcting. His movement disrupted something that had settled, and the structure responded by restoring equilibrium. At 11:27 p.m., Caleb felt the pressure shift upward, rising from the deck through his legs and spine. His joints locked briefly, not in pain but in suspension. His body held a posture that felt chosen rather than voluntary. His thoughts fragmented, not into confusion, but into compartments. Professional awareness remained intact. Emotional response dulled. Memory became observational. Caleb recognized this state from emergency training manuals, dissociation under threat. But this was not a threat response. It was too stable. The bridge pulsed once, deep and slow. Caleb's name surfaced again, not as a sound but as placement. It defined his position the way a coordinate defines location. He understood then why locals avoided the bridge at night. Not because of danger, but because presence mattered here more than passage. At 11:34 p.m., headlights appeared at the western approach. A vehicle slowed, then stopped short of the bridge. The driver remained inside. The engine idled. Caleb raised an arm to signal, relief surging despite his immobilization. The driver did not respond. After several seconds, the vehicle reversed direction and disappeared. Caleb felt a subtle release beneath his feet, the bridge adjusting again as external pressure changed. He understood then that the bridge responded not to individuals, but to distribution. It required a certain balance, a configuration that traffic disrupted. At night, when crossings were rare, the structure settled into equilibrium. When someone stood alone at its center, that equilibrium focused. Caleb's presence completed something unfinished. At 11:42 p.m., the erosion cavity beneath the eastern support collapsed inward. The sound was distant, muted by water and concrete. Caleb felt the change instantly. The bridge responded by tightening, tension redistributing through its length. The vibration ceased entirely. The sound faded. The pressure lifted. Caleb collapsed to his knees, breath returning in sharp gasps. The night air rushed back into awareness, cold and thin. The river resumed normal flow. The bridge felt inert beneath him, nothing more than concrete and steel. He stood unsteadily and walked, forcing movement before hesitation could return. This time, the bridge did not resist. His footsteps echoed normally. No resonance followed. Caleb reached the western approach at 11:49 p.m. He did not look back. He left the site without completing his final documentation. The official report, filed the next morning, cited structural anomalies requiring further evaluation. It made no mention of sound, vibration patterns, or physiological response. Caleb requested reassignment to daylight inspections only. The request was approved without comment. Within 3 months, the bridge was scheduled for partial closure. Reinforcement crews reported abnormal stress distribution but no visible cause. The erosion cavity was sealed. The structure stabilized. Locals continued to avoid it at night. Caleb resigned from his position 6 months later. He experienced lingering effects. His balance felt altered on elevated surfaces. He avoided bridges entirely. Sleep came in fragments, interrupted by the sensation of pressure beneath his feet, the memory of alignment without movement. Years later, after a heavy storm, the bridge collapsed. The failure occurred at night. No vehicles were present. Investigators concluded that long-term erosion had compromised internal supports beyond detection. The report described the collapse as sudden and unavoidable. No casualties were recorded. In the weeks following the collapse, residents reported an unexpected silence near the river. The low hum that some claimed to hear at night was gone. The area felt empty in a way that was not peaceful, but resolved. Caleb read about the collapse in a local paper. He did not feel relief. He felt absence. Something had been held together for a long time, and it had finally been allowed to let go. Some structures are never meant to be crossed endlessly. They require stillness, balance, someone to remain when movement stops. If this story unsettled you, subscribe for true horror encounters rooted in real environments and real consequences.